Hello, my friends and fellow castaways on planet Earth. I'd like to invite you to listen to the Trashwalker's Guide to Global Sustainability. I found this on a mega trash walk, and this is part one of a trilogy in 4 parts. My name is Christian Lütkemeyer, and I created this message. I am a trained volunteer for the City of Irvine Community Emergency Response Team. The idea is that we have trained citizens that can work together when catastrophe strikes and the professional first responders are overloaded. At this time, I'm actually also thinking about this as a climate emergency response team because the time to help ourselves to become sustainable has come. You may not be familiar with the term Trashwalker, so here I want to give a quick shout out to Anna Sachs, who is the viral TikTok Trashwalker, and she walks in New York City and looks at all the goodies that people and businesses are discarding that can still be reused. We can divide the class of trash walkers into subspecies. There is, for example, the urban trash walkers, and Anna is a great example for this. I myself, I'm a trail trash walker, so you could refer to me as a trash hiker because I go into protected open space and trails and try to clean up over there. Um, for the urban trash walkers, there could also be a subspecies of the dumpster divers defined. As trash walker, I walk my local trails to collect litter and leave the world a better place. I like to contrast trash walker to trash talker. A trash talker litters the atmosphere with disparaging, often insulting or boastful language with the intent to intimidate or provoke an emotional reaction. Here is a trash talker that is fairly notorious at this point. I have found my purpose while trash walking. This trash walker is still looking for his purpose. Here you can see a recent post of the trash talker on his True Social internet megaphone. He says, I'm going to lead a movement to get rid of mail-in ballots. Then he talks about how electronic voting machines are not reliable. The funny thing is, with his money, he trusts the electronic banking system and he promotes cryptocurrencies. All this stuff needs computers. So if it's good enough to count money, it should be good enough to count votes. Later in his post, you find some all caps sections talking about voter fraud. And then he writes about an executive order that he wants to issue to help bring honesty in the 2026 midterm elections. Now, when I read this, I connect this to the gerrymandering fraud that he has now committed, where he essentially did a midterm redistricting that takes away 4 safe spaces, safe seats from the Democratic side to create 4 more votes for the Republican side. So this creates an imbalance of 8 votes in Congress in his favor. So all these kinds of outrageous things are happening by the trash talker. Me, as a trash walker, I actually want to inspire a democratic movement to make Earth sustainable again. We need a lifeboat for Homo sapiens. We are really in a battle of the truth. In the past, there was truth and lies, and now we just live in this world of alternative facts. Now, the trash talker, he has his True Social website, and me, I have the truth with humor. This is actually a registered trademark that I have. And when we look at this picture, you are probably reminded of this battle between Goliath and David. And my hope is ultimately David won because he had the more far-reaching message. And so I feel my message in the end is more powerful and more far-reaching than the trash talk. Most of you are probably familiar with the concept of a shot across the bow. This is in a marine environment when a powerful actor wants to make a small vessel change course. Now, you may have noticed last year in Butler, Pennsylvania, Trump received a very powerful shot across the bow. Well, it was a shot across his ear, but it actually killed one person in the audience. So this is not a Hollywood-made stunt to kind of gain some more votes for the election that he desperately needed. I believe this is reality. And what I find really neat is, first of all, that this moment was captured by a photographer. And then look at this, the flag is upside down. This is definitely a moment of crisis. I'm an engineer. I enjoy designing complex systems and also identifying flaws in complex systems. So I pay attention to a lot of details. God knows this, and so he can send me subtle messages that happen while I'm just going about the things that I love, like riding my bike through town. I don't have to climb on Mount Sinai to receive his messages. He definitely doesn't have to send striking messages as he sent to Donald. So I just want to give you an example here from last year, December 12th, 2024, and to provide a little context. So God had saved Trump in Butler, and with this tailwind that God had provided, Trump actually won the election, and now he is essentially soon to going be the president. And for me, this was a really concerning development. And so I was in a concerned mindset here. And then I found the following items here while riding around in Irvine. So let's start out here with a lug nut on Starcrest. This is in Turtle Rock, so this is a little bit of a hill, not a Mount Sinai by any stretch. A little later down the hill, I find this brake plate without the brake pad. Then a little while later, I had to go to Nick's Auto Service, and there on the way, I found this Bali Gold Kratom herbal pain relief and anti-anxiety medication. And very close by to that, I found a screw and a hook. And so what did I understand was the message here? Well, the message is the wheels are coming off. You will not be able to brake, but don't worry. Here is here's some anti-anxiety and pain relief, and it looks you guys are screwed, but be careful, don't get hooked on this stuff. So that was a powerful message, and so my anxiety level went down after receiving this. Now, I didn't use this stuff. No, I'm not going to use stuff that I find on the street. My wife would be concerned about this, so just have to say this. On August 21, I again had to go to Nick's Auto Service, and I received another message. Now, I'm asking myself, why do I get so frequent messages when I go to Nick's Auto Service? And I think ultimately this is related to Nick's Auto Service being a not corrupt auto repair shop. I have gone recently to a free tire rotation place, And they rotated the tires and then came up with a repair list of several $100s. And so I didn't spend the hundreds of dollars with them. I took my car to Nick's Auto Service and they looked through the list, and none of the items that this free tire rotation shop had made up um, needed any repair. So really the message is be careful of the free stuff in America. Usually it's a corrupt bargain that you are going to get there. Well, anyway, to this particular message now that I found, you see this glove on the road, and then a little in the background you can see my bicycle. Essentially, what I found was I found a pair of gloves, and then there was this huge metal bolt very close by. And so, to me, the message here is very clear. Earth is falling apart, and the gloves need to come off now. You may have heard that Trump recently called into Fox and Friends and then talked about how he wants to try to get to heaven, and he becomes reflective. And I found this really fascinating. Now, I didn't hear this on Fox News, so maybe this is all fake news because I found this on the New York Times, but I do believe this did happen. And what I find so fascinating is here is essentially a lost soul that is broadcasting an SOS, Save Our Souls call to his followers on Fox News as a broadcast channel. So I was thinking about this, and I believe it is really now time for his last act. And when I think about act, I'm actually thinking about the Acts of the Apostles, section 9, 119. This is essentially the story of Saul's conversion. Shorthand here is like the road to Damascus. Saul essentially received a shot across the bow from God. He used to be an enemy of the Christians, and on the road to Damascus, Christ appeared to him, and he completely turned around, a 180-degree turn. He became a good Christian, and he changed his name from Saul to Paul to express this profound change that had happened to him. And so I see how Donald Trump could actually change his ways, and from Donald he becomes Ronald. And he can become a true conservative who conserves Earth. This would be so wonderful. What a story this is. Praise the Lord. I told you that the call into Fox Friends to me looked like an SOS call, but later I was thinking about this, and I actually think the SMS is a much better acronym. I hope everybody of you is very familiar with SMS. Anyway, so here's a very powerful story. Everybody, I think, knows about the Titanic. And I think this is actually really something to contemplate. This was a ship that was built with all the technology, the best technology at that time. And engineers were essentially saying this ship is unsinkable. And then, well, you all know what happened. Anyway, think about it. Um, Today, we are in this mindset that Earth is unsinkable. We can go drill, baby, drill, and nothing will happen. Anyway, you all remember what happened with the Titanic. It was a voyage, the maiden voyage. It never actually made it to any destination because there was an iceberg, and that clearly revealed that this complex safety scheme that they had implemented with dividing the ship in different chambers so that it wouldn't all fill up and sink, well, it wasn't working. So humans just don't really appreciate the ways reality can go wrong. And so I've been thinking about it. If here on this sinking Titanic, there had been a guy named Ronald. He would probably be up there after having helped all the women and children to get into the lifeboats. And then he would essentially be sending a Save Our Souls prayer and message from there. Now, think about the Donald. He always wants to be first, and I'm pretty sure in this, hey, how are we going to go about these lifeboat seats? He would have been first. And really, there is this me first mindset. And so that guy, he would be essentially looking, save my soul, SMS. Since Trump is concerned of going to heaven, I want to tell you a little story about the pearly gate to heaven. Now, everybody has maybe different ideas what heaven looks like, and I could have maybe asked an AI to draw heaven for me. But I think first we should look at the real world, and there are places that are hell these days. And I think most people have an idea where this is happening right now. And so if we contrast this reality with some of the AI dreams that the Trash Talker has published on True Social, I mean, if people are not offended by this, it's really sad. Where has humanity gone? Anyway, so let's look at the true pearly gate to heaven. The internet has lots of pictures, so I found this one here on the left side. It has a lot of gold in there, and we know Donald Trump is really attracted to gold, from golden toilets to all kinds of golden decorations on the mantelpiece in the Oval Office. He is attracted to this stuff. And so I can see if heaven has this pearly gate, this is the right place for Donald Trump to go. Now, here is a little story. So there was this pastor, and he passed away, and so he makes his way to the pearly gate, and he talks to St. Peter, and he wants to get admission here. And then St. Peter says, "Well, you got to wait a little bit. There's some processing delays here." So maybe he gets like a little app on his phone where he can register so that he can be admitted later, sort of asking for asylum at the southern border of the United States. And then a little bit later, there is this crazy cab driver that shows up, and he essentially drives straight to the pearly gate. And St. Peter, he sees him, and he just waves him through, and the guy is essentially in heaven in zero time. And now our pastor, he knocks again on the gate, and he asks St. Peter, "Hey, I did all these prayer services. People were coming to my mass, and this cab driver, he gets a fast pass. I can't believe this." And then St. Peter says, "Well, when you were holding mass, people were sleeping, and when he was driving, people were praying. That's why he got in so fast." I hope you have heard about President Nixon at the madman theory. Essentially, Kissinger would walk around and let world leaders know that they really had to be afraid of Nixon. I mean, he had so many nuclear warheads at his control. And so if he was a madman, this was really dangerous. And so this can be really good at convincing people that don't rock the boat, just give the madman what the madman demands. And so recently there is a book, The Madman Theory, that talks about how Trump takes on the world. And so, in the spirit of the madman theory, I think I can create the mad cab driver theory for the pearly gate. And essentially, if the mad cab driver makes a 180-degree turn, then very easily he will be able to get into heaven. And so I think the critical piece that Donald Trump has to do is he has to do his 180-degree turn so that he can get into heaven. Here's my explanation why God saved Trump. 2000 years ago, God sacrificed his own son to give us a good example how we should behave, love each other. Now, 2000 years later, God is looking at the world and he finds hundreds of millions of people who profess to follow Jesus. But when we look at the actual actions of many of these people, they are definitely not following Jesus' message. They're not washing somebody else's feet. So, what did God do? As a good teacher, if the good example doesn't work, then you have to provide a bad example. And so, by saving Trump, he essentially had an excellent corrupt example to show us. And essentially, Trump is now a shot across the bow to the whole of humanity, not just to the people in the United States. Essentially, the whole world is being shaken up. And we all have to essentially make a decision now. Are we going to go back and think about how we can be more like Jesus and follow his message? Or on the other side, are we going to go on the road to hell, the drill baby drill path? Essentially, Trump is the do not enter wrong way sign to humanity. Turn around. So here's an announcement that makes me really, really concerned about our future. The EPA, end of July, announced that they plan to rescind the greenhouse gas endangerment finding. This is essentially the foundation how the EPA has been regulating uh, greenhouse gases that are causing all this warming of the atmosphere. And so this is a big concern to me. And essentially, what they're proposing is we want to restore the freedom to pollute our air with greenhouse gases. Um, this is completely the wrong direction. And so, in my business, I'm actually working on technology, how to save significant power for the chips that go into the cloud, into AI data centers. And there's power savings possible 50%, up to 50%, 20% to 50%. And so I want to fight carbon emissions from AI, but we need to fight carbon emissions everywhere. Otherwise, we can't just do this in limited parts of the problem space. So I hope you are familiar with the logo of the Environmental Protection Agency. And as I was contemplating this rescinding of the endangerment rule, they have to change their logo a little bit. And so, since they want to save money, here is my proposal what they can do. Here is the version EPA dollar Trump point zero. And so it just takes a little minor tweaks, and we get to the Environmental Pollution Agency, and we find essentially a few plastic straws here, of course, in the environment. President Trump loves the plastic straws, so this should be good. And then I added a little bit of a crude oil slick here on the water. And then we have beautiful clean coal. And if you have ever gotten close to a coal mine, you would be not in the mindset of beautiful clean coal afterwards. So it is a sad time that we are living in, kind of like a sad joke. Overall, on the left side, this is really life, and on the right side, it's all about shareholder value. Really sad. I want to talk to you about 10. Now, you may think this might be 10 commandments because we talked a lot about God's word here. But no, I want to talk with you about 10 emergencies. So here we have our trash talker, and you know how the Constitution has certain ways, how Congress has power about the purse, where money is spent, and so forth. But what the trash talker figured out is that he can create these fake national emergencies, like this energy emergency, or here the emergency at the southern border, emergency about increase competitive edge, protect our sovereignty, and strengthen our national and economic security. Here, a crime emergency in the District of Columbia. And so, all in all, the New York Times has done a great job of collecting all these 10 emergencies and to show how these emergencies are now used to essentially take away powers that Congress used to have. And here we have to remember, ultimately, Congress is representing us, the people. So we don't have any power anymore because the president declares emergencies that are no emergencies and then does what he wants. You remember Nixon? If the president does it, it's legal. So this is kind of a mindset that I really think we should not be supporting. If you have received a solid US education, then you know this place here. This is the castle of the evil queen in Snow White, and you know that the evil queen had this mirror that knew everything. The name of this mirror was AI, and so the queen is asking AI now, mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all? And then the AI mirror essentially asks back, hey, are you interested in complexion? Fair means light skin, white. And so then the AI answers and shows Snow White, and essentially the whitest skin you can think about it. And I'm thinking now, this story is a little bit racist, isn't it? I mean, why are we looking here for the girl with the whitest skin? Something is not right here. So even with a free AI, you can ask a few questions before you have to pay money or the time runs out. So let's pose this question again. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all? And now we are actually interested in fairest, like fair, impartial and just, without favoritism or discrimination. And look what appears in our mirror. Christ, Holy Christ. So our AI still has one question left, and so I'm interested now to learn. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the corruptest of them all? Ooh, well, did you see that coming? Something to be worried about. Evolution is a fascinating subject. Unfortunately, there are quite a few schools in America and states where it cannot be taught in school anymore, which I find really, really sad. Anyway, in my thinking, evolution has now gotten us to a point where where we really need to worry about the question, is dilution the solution to pollution? And so as I'm thinking about this, I also start to think about what happens if Homo sapiens is now in a very comfortable place, the waistlines are growing, we are not really fighting for our survival anymore. And so I think at that point, do we have to worry about evolution happening to us? Sometimes I think I see some signs this is happening. As an engineer, I also think a lot about the amazing technological evolution story that we have seen. We can start maybe to think about a fist age. This is sort of the first tool of humans, and the fists are sometimes used for violence, but I also like to think about fists when I think about little babies. This is one of the first things they do with their hands. And so this is a happy baby when they make their fists. And actually, a fist is also protecting the little fingers, because if you have very delicate fingers, if you stick them out, it's easier to break them. So the fist is a protective element here. Anyway, so after the fist age, I would say there was the bone age when people realized the bones could be used as tools. Then, more advanced, they learned to shape stones and make elaborate Stone Age tools. Then we had the Bronze Age when humans learned to refine metals, smelt, and then we hit the Iron Age, much more harder, sharper metal. Weapons were made out of iron, steel. And then we hit the Industrial Revolution, and at that point, humans leverage essentially the energy of fossil fuels that have built up over millions of years, and this really provides the energy for this firework of technological development. And so I could define an electrical age, a nuclear age, and an electronic age, and a space age. And you see how humanity, because we were growing exponentially in our knowledge, in our numbers, all these developments are happening faster and faster and faster. It is an explosion. And so many of us are now in this mindset there is going to be this golden age, the AI age. And I'm actually worried about when I look at this, this is kind of like the Tower of Babel that described in the Bible, where the people wanted to build a tower that reached to the heavens. And I'm afraid we are actually a point where instead of reaching the AI heaven, we are actually at the precipice of a sustainability crisis. There's an explosion of corruption. There's an explosion of greenhouse gases. We are probably getting into a climate catastrophe. There's a collapse of justice. There may be nuclear war, the way different countries are saber rattling with their nukes. And so I'm afraid that we may actually soon see a world that is like this, and then all our beautiful technologies will be gone, destroyed. We have very sophisticated systems, but they are fragile. Hackers can hack into systems globally. So I think we really need to think about how can we together stay in a peaceful state so that this beautiful technological story can actually continue. I mean, think about this potential that humanity has if we don't essentially go over the cliff here. You may have heard that Germany is referred to as the land of poets and thinkers. I'd like to review a few of those thought leaders with you to appreciate their contributions. At the top left, you see Johann Gutenberg, whose printing technology provided technology to share information cheaply and widely, and so that was very important for human development. The second one in this row is Martin Luther. He recognized that the Catholic Church was corrupt when they started to sell seats in heaven for money on earth. He developed 95 theses to start a movement, and because of the printing technology, this movement was successful, and the Reformation took place. On the second row, you see Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. He has a lot of thoughts and contributions to Western culture and thinking. I like to mention him here because he wrote The Legend of Faust, which has very good teachable moments, and we will look at this later. Then third and fourth on the second row are Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, and everybody knows that Marx essentially identified how capitalists were taking advantage of powerless workers, and so their work contributed to the development of workers' unions, which was good for workers, but their thought ultimately also created the Soviet Union, and so this is a good reminder that sometimes maybe good ideas can be taken over by bad actors and result also in tragedy and injustice. At the bottom now, you can see Adolf Hitler. I don't consider him a positive thinker, but I think it is important to mention him because he shows how too much power in the hand of one person can really create a great tragedy. Ultimately, he is responsible for World War II and tens of millions of dead people. And so he also ultimately provided the reason for the creation of the United Nations, where the victors of World War II really wanted to have peaceful cooperation between countries in the future, and they created the United Nations to that end. Then finally, I like to mention Donald Trump here. He is still alive, and I'm not sure I would refer to him as a poet or thinker, but maybe he thinks that he is the greatest poet, and he should receive the Nobel Prize for Poetry. Anyway, I think he is actually right now doing a bang-up job of banging up the US Constitution and the United Nations and showing the weaknesses of these complex systems, how they can be corrupted and not really follow the spirit of the creators of those systems any longer. One insidious way how our thinking can be corrupted is by redefining important words and concepts and terms. Think about a patriot. This is a person who vigorously supports their country and is prepared to defend it against enemies or detractors. For me, I connect this, for example, to the late Senator John McCain, who suffered a lot for his country. Now, under Trump, we have now the Patriot 2.0. You remember the violent attack on Congress, and now the people who attacked Congress and the policemen and the senators and everybody there, they are now the patriots and hostages, and they were rightfully prosecuted by the Justice Department, but after Donald Trump became president again, he, the trash talker, essentially pardoned all of them. And so this was a corrupt use of the pardon power that the Constitution gives to the president. I'd like to take a look here at a picture with the United States Congress here. We can see also cabinet members of the US government sitting here and the Supreme Court justices at the bottom right, and they're essentially all listening to Master Trump, spreading out his arms and sending a message here. And so the room is essentially filled with fear of the Patriots 2.0. All the people in Congress know that whoever attacks them can be pardoned. And so when you listen to some people, they talk about that fear is driving their votes, and that's how this Congress is sharply divided, but still everybody sort of votes just the party line, regardless of conscience, because people are afraid. So essentially, now the people in Congress are hostages because they are afraid that if they don't toe the party line, then they will face violence. You may want to look into pizza doxing that justices receive when they vote against illegal actions of the Trump administration. You may be familiar with the seal of the Department of Justice. You see it here on the left-hand side. It has a little Latin text, Qui prodomina justitia sequitur. That means who prosecutes on behalf of the Lady Justice. You see a picture of Lady Justice at the bottom left with a blindfold that stands for the non-partisanship of justice. On the right-hand side, you can see now a modified seal of Justice 2.0 under Donald Trump. Now you can see this is the Department of Just His, which essentially means who prosecutes on behalf of Trump. And the Latin text has been changed to quid pro quo pecunia sequitur, which means this for that, money will follow. Lady Justice, she is essentially crying out, who screwed me? Talking about Lady Justice, I like to take a look with you at where she is working in Washington, D.C. So here on the right side, we can see the Supreme Court, where Lady Justice goes to work. And on the left side, you can see a building that some of you may still identify as the White House, but I think a better name for it would be this is a temporary shelter. This is essentially a temporary shelter from legal prosecution that conveys temporary protected status on the inhabitant until January 20th, 2029. You may have heard that Donald Trump declared a crime emergency in Washington, and now the National Guard and the military is showing up on the streets, kind of like a photo op. And so when Lady Justice went to the UPS store close to the White House, I guess that's where she got screwed. And so I think it's really dangerous if you are blindfolded and then running around in fairly skimpy clothes and getting close to a shelter where a convicted sexual predator is housed. So she should have known better, and maybe John Roberts should take better care of the people in the Justice Department. I like to talk with you about a Faustian bargain, which is a deal with the devil. Well, you see, there's evil in devil. So this relates to Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. He wrote the Legend of Faust, and so a Faustian bargain is a term that originates from the legend of Faust, who traded his soul to the devil for knowledge and power. This is a deal where someone sacrifices something of great moral or spiritual value, like their soul or personal values, in exchange for worldly or material benefits, such as knowledge, power, or riches. The core idea is that the short-term gain is ultimately outweighed by the long-term loss or sacrifice. Mark Antokolsky, he created this statue of Mephistopheles. Mephistopheles is the character in Goethe's Faust who is acting as the devil. Sometimes the devil will be shown with hoofs or bone spurs, so be careful if you meet a person that has bone spurs. The word Faust is German and it's fist. A fist is essentially a sign of power and blunt force, and when we raise our fists, we are not deliberating anymore. This is in contrast to an open hand that can grasp things, that is a sign of welcoming others, and grasping something is important if I want to understand something. Here you see this iconic picture after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump in Butler, and this really conveys the spirit of the fist. And when I see these kinds of pictures, I really ask myself, can we still grasp love? How can we actually find a way back where we love each other? I like to contrast Faust with the US president standing here with his fist raised, fight, fight, fight. Faust is a German and Donald Trump, he is a US leader and has German ancestors. Now, in the word leader, you find led, and that's an important element that we will dive into a little later. So here is Faust, and he is willing to sell his soul to gain knowledge and power. He wants to become a polymath. A polymath is a person who has a very wide and very deep knowledge. In contrast, here we have Trump, who has stated, I love the poorly educated. So essentially, he is somebody who says, I know everything better. I'm willing to sell the soul of my country for money, power, and to destroy education. So it's not about gaining knowledge, it's really here about destruction of knowledge. And so I was trying to find a good term. How can you describe a person like Trump? And if Faust wanted to be a polymath, I think then Donald Trump is a polypath because he thinks he knows everything, but I don't think he is a polymath at all. Most of you will be familiar with the game Rock, Paper, and Scissors. It's a great game to entertain little kids. You don't need any tools. Everything can just be done with your hand. So the rock is represented by the fist, a blunt force instrument, and paper is represented by the open hand. It is flexible and embracing, and in the rules of rock, paper, scissors, paper actually wins against the rock. We'll later talk about the scissors here. The open hand can essentially grasp a problem and diffuse force with flexibility. One expression that I like a lot in Faust is des Pudels Kern, or translated into English, the poodle's core. Many times we are searching for sort of the origin of a problem, and this phrase kind of expresses this. The phrase is taken from a scene in Faust during which a black poodle follows Faust home and transforms into a wandering scholar who is actually Mephistopheles in disguise. Faust exclaims, Das war also des Pudels Kern, so that was the poodle's core. That is, so that's what was going on inside the poodle. So for us, when we are analyzing problems, it's really important to find the poodle's core. As I was thinking about the Faustian bargains and about the black poodle, I had to think that the devil can hide in many creatures, and then this connected with me to this first page of the Daily Star that ran some months ago. So be careful of the poodles, my friends. I hope you are familiar with the role of devil's advocate. Sometimes we need an actor like the devil. Think about very complex systems and machines. On the right side, you can see like a Rube Goldberg invention on a post stamp. And so when we are devil's advocate, we can challenge designers of complex systems to ask what could go wrong. And I'm thinking about self-driving cars, deployment of AI, greenhouse gas emissions, leaded gasoline, freon. Some of those things may actually turn out to be Faustian bargains where there are some beautiful short-term gains, but then later there are some really adverse consequences. It is interesting to see devil's advocate applied to complex games with irrational and greedy human players. As an example here, I'm thinking about the US Constitution that had the intent to create individual rights and liberties, to ensure domestic tranquility, and to promote the general welfare. And now, a few hundred years later, I think there's a large number of people in the United States that feel that this constitution is not delivering these promises. Similarly, we can look at the Charter of the United Nations and we find that this wants to ensure that we practice tolerance and live together in peace with one another as good neighbors. And I think here also the reality doesn't deliver the intent of the original system. And so I feel we are at a point where we really need to play devil's advocate on these systems and then apply changes so that we get back to the original spirit that the founders had when they created these systems. Rock, paper, scissors is an excellent game to explain the US government system to 5-year-olds. On the left, Rock is essentially the President of the United States who presides over the executive branch. He holds and controls all worldly power. Paper is Congress. They receive the power from voters and writes laws on paper. They have the power of the purse. In rock, paper, scissors, paper wins against rock, and Congress should control the executive, and the executive is bound to faithfully execute the laws that get delivered on paper. Now, the judiciary on the right is essentially the decider if laws are constitutional. So they have only the power of words. And now this system fails when the president is a philanderer because he is not faithful. I want to take a look at the founding of the United Nations in October 1945. I hope you are all more or less familiar with this. The origin of this is that the nations after World War II wanted peace and they wanted a rules-based order with justice that was blind and essentially give human rights to everybody and promote those. Now, the victors of World War II, the United States, United Kingdom, France, Soviet Union, and China, they were kind of like the five adults in the room, and they reserved veto power for themselves. I mean, if you think about it, there were maybe many smaller countries, and none had sacrificed as much as those in the war. So they reserved this special right so that they could make sure that the rules of the game were followed and the original spirit was followed. Here you see an amazing picture of a finely balanced complex system. Now, I want to use this to think about the Cold War superpower balance. So very shortly after the United Nations were created, we run into this problem that there is this superpower that promotes capitalism, and then there is the other superpower that promotes communism, socialism, and we end up in a world where these two superpowers create lots of nukes, and we essentially end up in a picture where there's mutually assured destruction, and that actually created a stable environment that allowed me to grow up in peace in Western Germany. And so I'm very grateful for this time. But then the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. And when we look at the US, they had the Iraq War in 2003. And at this point, they have turned into a global super bully that essentially shakes all the countries down. There's tariffs, and it is really a frightening picture to think about all these nukes in the hands of people who are not bound anymore by the spirit, so countries should live peaceful with each other. So this is really a sad state of affairs. Yeah, I look back at the United Nations and ask myself what happened here. There's essentially a bunch of me firsts now, and essentially there are no more adults here. And how can we actually move forward in this situation? If you are still watching this, I'm amazed. I want to thank you, and I am working on the Trashwalker's Guide to Global Sustainability Part 2, and I will share this as soon as it is ready for delivery. Thank you so much. Stay safe. Goodbye.